I'm live. Great. It's Tuesday and I'm sitting somewhere else. I read this morning the first part of chapter 7 of the second part of the book entitled Life in the World Unseen by Anthony Borgia, and I had to finish because my battery went empty. So this is part 2 of Life in the World Unseen, as described by the former Monsignor Robert Hugh Benson, who is talking from the beyond to us. We continue. It was while she was in process of the letter that we first met. Once, when the three of us were seated in the garden, pleasantly discussing all manner of things, we espied walking up the garden path a figure that was well known to Edwin and myself. He had been our ecclesiastical superior when we were upon the earth plane, and he was what is known as the Prince of the Church, or a Prince of the Church. He was still attired in his customary habiliments, and we were all agreed, when we came to compare notes afterwards, that they eminently suited both the place and the conditions. The full-length style and the rich colouring of the robes seemed to blend most harmoniously with all about us. There was nothing incongruous about it, and as he was at full liberty to wear his robes in the spirit world, he had done so, not because of his former position, but because through long custom, and because he felt that he thus, in some small measure, helped to add to the colourful beauty of his new habitation. Now, although the high office which he had held with distinction upon earth had no counterpart or significance in the spirit world, yet he was well known to many here by name and by sight and by repute. This provided a good reason for his retaining his earthly style of clothing, at least for the present. But the deference that his position upon earth had always evoked, he utterly cast aside when he came into the world of spirit. He would have none of it, and he was very insistent that all who knew him, and those who did not, should be strictly attentive to his wishes in this respect. He was very much loved when he was incarnate, and in this respect he was very much loved when he was incarnate, and it is but natural that with his advent into spirit lands, those who knew him should show the same respect as before. Respect is one thing, for we all respect each other in these realms, but deference that should be given to others of greater spirituality is another thing altogether. He early recognized this, so he told us, and from my own personal knowledge of his innate humility, I could guess that such would be the case with him. Our first meeting led to others, and many have been occasions, and I shall enjoy many more, when he has joined Edwin, Ruth, and myself, where we have sat in the garden or gone forth together. It was during one of our peregrinations together that I asked our former superior if he would give me some brief sketch of his first impression of the spirit world. What struck him so forcibly when he found himself here was not only the immensity and beauty of the spirit world, but the very description of this world itself in relation to the earth world, and most particularly in relation to the life he had left behind him. First of all, there came the feeling, an almost crushing one, of having wasted his earthly life upon seemingly non-essential irrelevancies, and a great deal of useless formularies and formalism. But friends had come to his rescue intellectually, and they had assured him that the time in his personal application had not been wasted, although his life had been encompassed by the pomp and pageantry of his office. However much the latter had engrossed those about him, he had personally never let them become an absorbing factor in his life. He derived much comfort from his reflection. But what he found to be most mentally disturbing was the invalidity of the doctrines which he had perforce upheld. So many of them were tumbling in ruins about him. But again he found friends to guide him. and they did so in a simple and direct manner, such as would appeal to his alert mind, namely, to forget the religious teachings of the earthly life and become acquainted with spirit life and its laws, discard the old and accept the new. He had therefore made every endeavour to do so, and he had been completely successful. He swept his mind clear of all that had no foundation in truth, and he made the very pleasant discovery that, at last, he was in full enjoyment of absolute spiritual freedom. He found it was so much easier to obey the natural laws of the spirit world than to obey the Church's commandments, and it was very pleasant to be rid of the formalities of his earthly position. He could at least speak with his own voice freely, and not with the voice of the Church. Altogether, said our former superior, he thought that his greatest impression upon his arrival in the spirit world was this splendid sense of freedom, first of mind and then of body, and made so much the greater in the spirit world by the measure of its absence in the earth world. Well, so this was very short, but there it is. The battery was empty. The next chapter, chapter 8, is called Recreations, and I think I'll make a separate chapter of that, because it's a bit bright and too hot in here. It is still Tuesday, and I'm on a Zoom later, so I finish now and do the rest next chapter 8 another time. Good night.